Gray Matter live stream. Hopefully, you caught the change in scheduling. As you know, normally we're with you on a Wednesday night. Tonight, it's a Tuesday night special because we wanted to have a very special guest on today. And I'm going to introduce him in a moment. Before I do that, a couple of kind of housekeeping matters. I want to remind everyone to check out a couple of our podcasts. We're back on Apple and Spotify now, as well as the other platforms we've been on, and really gaining a lot of traction there. And I want people to go on and check out our most recent commentary that we published called Onward Christian Soldiers. I'm really quite pleased with this one. I think it tackles a very important subject, which is the challenges that are facing faith in Canada, and they are many, and they've been very much in the news right now. And so this commentary, tries to talk about them, talk about why these things are happening, and also, more importantly, what can we do about them? How can we sort of accept these challenges to our faith and to its expression in our country? And then also we have the interview with Maureen Steele, who talks about state-sanctioned kidnapping in the United States, and a topic that is also relevant to Canadians in this country. So who do we have on today? Well, listen, as you know, we try to have people on who are going to provide our viewing and listening audience with information about what's happening in the economy. As I talk to people and as I watch, the commentary on our social media, so many people are worried. They're scared about what's going on. They see our GDP is nearly last in the G20, its growth. They see really Canada being listless economically. They see the challenges, of Donald Trump's tariffs. Our government in Ottawa is talking about economic alliances with the European Union. It's so hard to get reliable information, and people are scared. I saw a recent poll where most of the respondents were within $200 each month of bankruptcy, of insolvency. These are really scary times. And so we thought it'd be great to have somebody on who knows a lot about the economy, and he spends a lot of time analyzing economic trends, has been doing it for a long time, and also who's very smart and very honest and very trustworthy. So when you hear from him, you could actually take this stuff to the bank. His name is Peter Pejovich. Great to have you on the program, Peter. It's a pleasure to have you on the live stream tonight.
Thank you, Leighton. It's a pleasure to be back once again.
Yeah, so I'm going to introduce Peter properly in a moment. By the way, I just want to mention this too. His wife is a brilliant lawyer who works with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I don't know if she's working on this case, but I wanted to mention it. It's this gentleman, Jeff Evely, who's out in Nova Scotia, and you might have seen this in the news. He received a $28,000 fine for just going into the woods, challenging this crazy law now that's been mimicked in New Brunswick. And the Justice Center is accepting donations, is calling for donations to fund his legal defense. So if this is something that you want to support, I encourage you to visit their website or visit their social media and donate. Peter's wife, Allison, she works on cases like this. And that funding is very important to the work that they do on behalf of all Canadians. They tackle cases that impact every single Canadian, even though that's not happening in Nova Scotia. Don't imagine for a moment that they couldn't happen in your province, no matter where you live. So I wanted to mention that. So Peter is really is a wealth expert. He's with Wellington Altus Private Wealth. He's senior portfolio manager there. Over 2 decades of experience. He's enjoyed a distinguished career in really building wealth for Canadians. And he works in this every single day. He watches economic trends, and he's very astute in understanding them. And so I thought it'd be great to have Peter on to really educate us and have a discussion about some of the things that are going on in the economy that, frankly, I don't understand fully. Michael, as smart as he is, he probably doesn't either. So we turn to the people who understand these things, and I know Peter's got some great ideas about what's going on economically. So let's start with the biggest one, Peter, the one that it's on everybody's lips. Really, it's been dominating conversation most of the year since Donald Trump was inaugurated, and even before then, when he told us that the tariffs were coming. He's raised tariffs on Canadian goods from 25 to 35%. Citing Canada's alleged failure to curb fentanyl smuggling and its retaliatory trade actions. And of course, Carney as expressing, disappointment, and he reaffirmed Canada's commitment to the CUSMA, the trade agreement with Canada and the U.S. And he's talking about defending Canadian jobs, investing in competitiveness, and diversifying trade. But all of this is starting to sound really hollow, and Canadians are really feeling this in their pocketbooks. I have a client, for example. He's one of the leading manufacturers of metal waste containers in Canada, in Western Canada, and of course he can't build them without steel, and so these tariffs are really impacting him. And so we turn to you. What do you think is, first of all, why do you think these tariffs are happening? Well, what's the real story here? Are we getting the truth about it? And how can Canadians expect these tariffs to impact us both now and going forward in the future if Canada cannot achieve a realistic trade deal with the United States?
Thank you, Leighton. Okay, so first of all, let's maybe just put some things in perspective with respect to these tariffs. Um,
See, he's so busy that phone never stops ringing. Folks, we are so blessed to have him for an hour.
That's
This
right.
guy, this guy is super busy. Just kidding, Peter. No, he really
no,
is
no
that busy.
problem. There's somebody that keeps trying to phone. I keep putting it on mute,
I think
and
it's
for
Mar-
some reason, it just
I think it's Mark Carney. Maybe you should pick it up. He's calling you, Peter.
they
What are we gonna do
probably
about these?
know.
What am I gonna do
They
about
probably
these?
know I'm going to spill the goods on them. And I'm going to say things they don't want me to say, so they're like calling me to be quiet. No, but no, really, it's the same person who just kept phoning about 3 times. I'm trying to turn it off, but let's just put some things in perspective with these tariffs. So these tariffs apply to Canadian goods not compliant with the Canada United States Mexico Agreement, or CUSMA, which exempts approximately 95% of Canadian exports.
That much,
So
95%. Wow.
yeah, yeah. So it's the media sometimes likes to make this out like it's on everything, and it's not. It's not on everything.
Well, that's already a
S-
very important piece of information. I did not know that.
Yeah. So if you do some math, like well, this is back of the napkin type math, so it may not be 100%
Easy
accurate, but
for you. Easy for you to say.
yeah, but if you did a little bit of math, I believe it works out to about 3.5% tariff rate overall when you
Yeah.
average it out across all Canadian exports. So it's not really 35%. It's 35% in certain areas, but not necessarily everywhere. But of course, certain key sectors like automotive and manufacturing will be affected. So, non-compliant goods, particularly from small to medium-sized businesses relying on non-North American inputs. So that's important to understand. Non-North American inputs, like from China, for example, do face significant costs, with some profit margins being eroded entirely in some cases. I'm not sure if that possibly
And
affects your
this is
friend.
China has very heavy tariffs on our agriculture right now too, don't they?
Yes, and now they will argue it's retaliatory tariffs, but
Mm.
you know, we did tariff them, on some other areas.
So basically,
Um,
Canada's fighting with all the big boys on the block.
yes, we're not making too many friends these days. But affected Canadian sectors, do include processed foods, non-quota pork, lobster, seafood, electronics, and machinery, which do struggle with the CUSMA
Mm.
certification due to complex supply chains.
Yeah.
So if you kind of expand it just a bit further, for those non-compliant goods, so that includes 50% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, 25% tariffs on non-CUSMA compliant autos and auto parts, 50% tariffs on certain copper products like pipes and wiring, 10% tariffs on Canadian energy imports, and 35% duties on Canadian softwood lumber, plus 100% tariffs on computer chips and semiconductors. But I don't believe that represents a big portion
Mm.
of our economy.
Hmm.
So, um, so, and another way to kind of look at this that I always want to ask is why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Simple
That's the
question
big
like that.
question that people really should be asking. And of
Right.
course, they just say, well, the media just says, well, Orange Man bad. He's Hitler. He wants to take over the world. But he really does. America really does have an economic plan behind this, don't they?
Well, we believe so. They have written several papers over the last several months, trying to explain bits and pieces of what their plan is, both in direct papers and also indirect papers from people that are in the administration, in the Trump administration, and
Hmm.
what they've written about. So if you want to ask the question why, and then that's very important because unless you're the best you've got is Orange Man bad, and that's your explanation of everything. Orange Man bad. You're never going to solve anything. You're
That
not
won
going to.
Carney the election, by the way.
Well, it's fine for winning elections, but it
I
may
mean,
not be.
elbows up was just another way of saying Orange Man bad, right? I mean,
Sure, elbows
yeah,
up or Orange Man can win you an election, but it's probably not going to win you a trade deal.
right. Hmm.
So, what is going to win you a trade deal is first and foremost understanding your, I don't want to use the word opponent, but understanding who's on the other side of the table and what
Yeah,
their interests are.
yeah, yeah.
What are they trying to accomplish? And then once you understand what they're trying to accomplish, then you ask yourself, well, first and foremost, without being overly combative, I mean, of course, the initial response is you might want to be combative, but if you stop and think about it, a better question is how can we help?
Right.
what can
Hmm.
what can what are we good at and what can we do that can possibly help them in terms of so they can meet their goals, and in return if we can help them, there's a probably a pretty good odds that would also help us in the end.
Right. Right.
Because a partnership is more valuable, or partnering with an entity is more valuable than being at odds with them.
Yeah.
And certainly, Orange Man bad equals at odds. We need to find ways of how we can partner. So what do they want? I mean, there's probably many things they want, and some of it maybe they've said explicitly, some of it they haven't said explicitly, but you might want to imply. So some of the things that were said explicitly, for example, is U.S. reshoring of manufacturing, which may have consequences like, well, maybe they don't need our automobiles,
Hmm.
automobile parts, because they
Yeah.
can make them in Detroit or in the southern states.
Do you think that's a realistic goal for America, though? Or, I mean, given how much manufacturing has been farmed out to other parts of the world, like China and Vietnam and India, is that a
Yeah,
realistic goal, do you think, that America has? Or is that more posturing and political policy making?
yeah. So good question. It's probably unrealistic if certain other policies also don't change with it.
Right.
But it is possibly realistic if certain other policies are enacted. So, for example, if the U.S. dollar is significantly stronger than,
Mm,
say, the RMB
right.
or other foreign currencies,
Yeah.
it's an unrealistic goal, because
Yeah.
how could you possibly compete manufacturing in the U.S. with a strong dollar when other countries have a much weaker currency, and it's just simply
Mm,
cheaper to import, even with tariffs.
right.
But if there was, say, a policy enacted which resulted in a significant devaluation of the U.S. dollar vis-a-vis other currencies, now that all of a sudden becomes a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or for example, another way to look at it is, what if the U.S., which they've said they're going to do, by the way, wants to invest heavily in AI and robotics?
Mm,
Well, if they can become more efficient through technology, then once again, that goal might start to look a little bit more realistic. Maybe not
right.
today, but maybe next year or 5 years from now.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there are policy tools that they can enact, which could make manufacturing more realistic in the U.S. But it is highly complex, and it does involve multiple avenues or vectors of change, and call it reform,
Hmm.
that they would
Hmm.
have to enact. And tariffs is probably the first, almost it's the first inning, really.
Right.
In terms of the many policies they would have to
Uh,
enact in the future,
yeah.
should they wish to.
But the
Uh,
Trump team is boasting publicly about massive amounts of money that are being yielded from these tariffs. Is that a lot of smoke and mirrors, or is that real?
No, that's real. They posted, the US government posted their first monthly budgetary surplus in June, which shocked Wall
Wow.
Street. And it was not well publicized. I mean, if you turned on the
Trying to
news,
imagine
nobody,
that happening in Canada after,
yeah, nobody said anything
10
about
years
it.
of the Liberals.
No, it
Sorry.
was only for a month. Let's put it in
Yeah.
perspective. It wasn't, they don't have a surplus on the year.
Yeah.
But
Still, baby
they post
steps.
baby steps, and the surplus was wholly attributed to tariffs.
Wow.
And their annual deficit dropped a bit actually to 1.3 trillion. So they still got a long way to go because that's still a
Yeah.
pretty big deficit, but it
Yeah.
is, like you said, baby steps in the right
Yeah.
in the right direction.
Yeah.
But certainly, and it's a complex issue. Like, why do they want to, reshore manufacturing? Obviously, one is to give jobs back to their people. It would be a simple, easy one to basically restore Main Street and not just have Wall Street benefit at the expense of Main
That
Street.
that makes a
So,
lot of sense though, doesn't it? And I mean,
sure it does.
we should be thinking the same way in Canada, shouldn't we? I mean, Mr.
We
Carney should be talking about that too.
So, interesting enough, and we can maybe talk a little more about this later. But I mean, there was recently a proposal from the Conservatives on I believe they're going to call it the Canada Sovereignty Act,
Yeah, I read
which,
about
if
this.
you look
Yeah.
closely at it, actually mirrors a lot about what the Americans have been doing. And I wonder if either Pierre Poilievre kind of copied that off of Trump's platform, or maybe, who knows? I don't want to be a
Well,
conspiracy theorist, but maybe he
that's
got a phone
encouraging.
call.
That's encouraging. I mean, I think that's good. I mean, that's good politicking. I mean, if something is working in the United States, why wouldn't we try it in Canada?
Yeah.
Obviously we've got to do something in Canada to get our economy back on track. But and it's mysterious, really, the idea to many people why Canada isn't doing better. It seems like, and of course, everybody blames government, especially the federal government, and that's part of the story.
Yeah.
But
Part of the
I
story.
expect there's probably a lot more to it, isn't there, Peter?
Yeah, and it's partly it is partly government, but it also revolves around what one of the other policies that President Trump is enacting, which is a reinvigoration of supply side economics. So
Interesting.
whereas the last I don't know, at least 20 plus years, they focus more on consumer economics, i.e., what can government do to have the consumer spend more and get
Right.
themselves into more
Because
debt.
that keeps the economy going, doesn't it? Consumer
Well,
spending.
that's an old argument between production versus consumption based
Yeah.
economics. And so the last number of years has been more of a focus on consumption. This is a reversion back to production. So supply
Ah,
side economics focuses on production and what can government do through deregulation, lowering the cost of doing business,
right.
making business more efficient, such that you help the production side, or what's called the supply side of the economy, flourish.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And if the supply side flourishes, the thinking is well, that'll create jobs, and if people have jobs, then you know what, they'll spend money.
Right.
But it's the cart before the horse, right? It's
Yeah.
supposed to focusing on the consumer without making sure they have
Mm.
work. This focuses more on supply side. And if you want an example, the most recent example would be Ronald Reagan. So
Okay.
the Reagan administration was heavily focused on supply side economics. So that's again going back to Milton Friedman,
Yeah.
Chicago School,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a reversion, essentially back to that.
Yeah.
But it's also related to, say, U.S. trade deficits and reducing the amount of dollars, i.e., wealth, leaving the United States. So if the
Mm-hmm.
United States, say, has a $2 trillion trade deficit, that means $2 trillion net is escaping like air out of a balloon out of the United States and making others wealthy outside the United States.
Right.
So, and that is a structural function of being the world's reserve currency, because if you are the world's reserve, you actually must, to some degree, supply the world with dollars. And one of the
Right.
ways you can supply the world with dollars is by running trade deficits,
Yeah.
i.e., you import more than you export. And therefore, instead of, while you're importing goods, say from China, you're exporting dollars, and then those dollars can then be recycled into the global Eurodollar system to settle trade balances.
Right.
That's the way
I,
it's been done the last number of years, but that may
yeah.
change going forward.
Peter, I want to come back to this Canada Sovereignty Act because I
Yes.
think this is something that could be really, really important for us. Before we go there, you and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and you were explaining to me about some very important pieces of legislation that the Trump administration has put into place that could impact the world monetary system that you were just talking about.
Yes.
And this is something that I had not heard of, but I dare say very few people listening to this program or watching it have heard about. Could you explain about these new laws? I believe one's called the Genius Act.
Yes.
Explain about these, why they're important, and how they fit into America's long-term strategy in terms of their economy and how this could impact Canada.
Yeah. And once again, most people turning on the television, say so to speak, in Canada may have not have heard this. It was not highly publicized, but it was quite well publicized in the United States. And it is these are two acts which have the potential to really change the way the world works, so to speak.
Hmm.
So maybe before we even go there, I'll start with the Genius Act, but not a day goes by, before when if I say I'm talking to somebody and we start talking, say, about Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, and they tell me, oh, it's a scam, and it's it's
I thought that
it's
too before I met you, Peter. I got to be honest.
well,
I was one of
you
the
know,
great unwashed. And
it's
Tom,
honestly most of Canadians, and
yeah,
this kind of goes back to one of your points about why does Canada have a lower productivity rate. There are many reasons, but one of them, might be a bit of a tardiness, let's say, in being adaptive to change.
right.
And sure, this is different. We did not have cryptocurrencies 30 years ago, 50 years ago, so this does represent a lot of change for people. But the reality of it is, if it was a scam, why has the U.S. government added it as a strategic reserve asset?
Yeah.
It's Bitcoin is now in the same, maybe not the same, but it's in the same realm as, say, gold, where they're
Yeah.
looking at,
I
they
bet a
actually
lot of people don't
legalized it.
realize that that's true.
It's so how could a scam be a legal reserve asset of the United States? I'd say
Yeah.
that to say that would be a stretch if the United
Yeah.
States has legalized it in that manner. So these two acts, the Genius Act and Clarity Act, go further on stable coins, cryptocurrencies, and regulating cryptocurrencies in such a way to legitimize it, not regulating in a way to stifle it. The
Right.
opposite, actually. They're regulating it to have it flourish,
Mm.
which confuses people because the immediate assumption would be that they're trying to squash it, and they're not. So, starting with the Genius Act, so the full term of it is the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act, which is a bipartisan U.S. Senate bill introduced on February 4th of this year to regulate payment stablecoins, which are digital assets pegged to stable assets like the U.S. dollar.
Hmm.
So, just to rephrase that. So, instead of sending dollars globally or between you and I, either through a bank, like bank to bank, like say if you and I exchange an Interact banking transfer, say for example, or maybe if we sent money overseas through the SWIFT system,
Hmm.
um, you can take these dollars, you can digitize them into a stable coin, and then the stable coins can be sent anywhere in the world at an extremely low cost, peer to peer, meaning that it doesn't necessarily have to go through an intermediary. So, so this is revolutionary because instead of taking 2 or 3 days for your money to get to, I don't know, Europe, let's say, it takes like 7 seconds,
Wow.
and it's instant settlement, and it's dirt cheap.
And secure.
So
They
and
can make
and
it secure.
and secure,
Mm.
and it's on a blockchain. So that's called a trustless system, meaning that you don't have to trust anybody. You don't have to trust your bank or the other person's bank to make sure they follow through with it. It's done in such a manner that you are assured that that money is going to get there. So they've been around for a number of years already, but the Genius Act is essentially regulating them
Yeah.
to give them legitimacy.
This
There was
sounds
a,
truly revolutionary.
it is, like it is, and part of the regulation involves a couple of years ago when we had those bank failures
Right.
in like Silicon Valley Bank, for example,
Hmm.
that failed in the
Yeah,
United States.
I remember.
One, without mentioning names, one of the major stablecoin issuers had a lot of their US dollar deposits at that bank. So when that bank went under, there was concern that they were going to lose their backing because if the bank went under, well, what happened to those dollars? Now, in the end, it was all settled and they found ways to take care of it. But this act aims to regulate these stablecoins such that the U.S. dollars on deposit is going to be deposited into U.S. Treasuries through the
Oh.
Federal Reserve. So it's 100% one-to-one backing of U.S. dollars into U.S. Treasuries.
So it could stabilize the whole banking system.
Yes, and
Mm.
here's the other thing, if you're going to think of it on a bigger picture level. So essentially, they're regulating and saying that these stable coins must buy U.S. Treasuries as a backing, and it's got to be 100% one-to-one.
Right.
So if you think it through, one of the problems with the financial system and with the U.S. government's ability to issue debt or issue treasuries the last number of years is a lot of sovereign nations have stopped buying U.S. treasury bonds. 15,
Mm.
20 years ago, the Chinese government and other governments around the world were buying lots and lots of
I've
treasuries.
heard that China has been jettisoning a lot of their U.S. debt, and that actually America's biggest creditor now is Great Britain. I was surprised to read that. Is that true?
And that's a little misleading actually. That
I don't
it's
mean
well,
to
first of all,
mislead
it's
anybody.
well, no, no,
This
no, no, no. It's true that China and other sovereign nations have stopped buying U.S. debt to a large degree. The What's misleading about the Great Britain part is Great Britain within Great Britain is the City of London, and let's just call the City of London the hedge fund capital of the world.
really?
So whether
Mm.
it's Ireland, this is the top buyers of treasuries are City of London, call it Great Britain,
Yeah.
Ireland, Luxembourg, Cayman, like those kind of places. Basically,
Right.
all the areas where hedge funds live.
Mm.
And it's those hedge
Interesting.
funds that are now the primary buyers of treasuries, and they're very
Okay.
price and yield sensitive. Whereas
Mm.
sovereign nations would buy it simply as a quote unquote
Mm.
reserve. They weren't trying to make money off it. They just wanted it as a reserve to settle trade balances. Hedge funds, when they buy it, no, they're looking for a profit. So it becomes a very, let's call it fickle buyer of these
Mm.
things. So if they're buying, so if there's less and less demand for these treasuries globally, but the US creates this technology and this regulation through stablecoins where they've essentially digitized US dollars that are backed by treasuries. So you can have countries or entities outside the US that may not want to buy US treasury bonds, but they'd be very, very, very interested in buying US stablecoins, which are backed by US
Mm.
dollars, which buy US treasuries. So
Right.
if you kind of like connect the dots, even if they're not directly buying the US treasuries, they're then buying these US stablecoins,
Hmm.
which are buying the US treasuries. So the US just found basically a backdoor to creating demand for their U.S. treasuries
Right.
without having countries buy them directly.
Okay.
Which one of the reasons they're calling it the Genius Act. It's a bit of a play on words.
Right. I love
So
acronyms though.
yeah,
You gotta love them.
because in a genius way, they just found a buyer for their debt.
Yeah. And well, I want to ask you something else about
Yeah,
part of this legislation. I understand is that um, America said they're not going to have a central digital currency. That they've actually legislated that that's not going to happen.
right.
It looks like the Carney government is really interested in introducing a central digital currency for Canada. Why would the Americans not want to have a central digital currency? And how does that fit in with what you were just explaining?
Yeah. So again, if you think this through very carefully, it's kind of genius. Why would they have a central bank digital currency competing against stablecoins, which are buying U.S. Treasuries? See, they're going to be
Okay.
relying on these stable coins to grow and grow and grow. And right now,
Hmm.
it's call it 300 billion in terms of market cap. They hope that to be 3 trillion or 6 trillion or 10 trillion
Wow.
one day.
This could
And
totally solve their debt problem, couldn't it?
it is one tool in their toolbox to help solve their debt
Yeah.
problem.
Wow.
And so they want this to flourish. They want this to grow because the more stable coins grow, Tether would be one of the primary examples. The more treasuries they're going to buy, which is going to help them, issue debt and renew debt.
Yeah.
If they all of a sudden had CDBCs, well, that would compete against that, and that doesn't make any sense at all.
Right. I
They
see.
don't. They want to force the money into the stable coins because that is what's going to help back their treasury issuance.
Hmm.
Now what Carney's doing is going to be, we have to wait and see what they do. The Bank of Canada, I believe a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago, they did issue a statement saying that they are suspending, or that they suspended um, the idea of a CDBC. Now,
Right.
Carney might be trying to revitalize that,
Yeah.
but the last official statement from the
Yeah.
Bank of Canada was that they were not going to be
That's
pursuing it.
that's one of their common techniques, though, isn't it? They'll introduce something, then they'll sort of test the waters on it, and then they find out that the appetite is not there in the public, and then they say, "Oh no, we're not doing this yet," and then they
Yep.
break it out again a year. And we've seen this with the Online Harms Act, right? Which
Yes.
it just won't go away. It's like a bad smell in a gas station toilet. No matter how much Lysol you spray, it still smells like whatever went down the drain. And
Yes.
we unfortunately we can't flush that thing as much as we'd like to. One other
No.
thing that about this, Peter, and when you and I talked, that was really intriguing, is the Trump administration, his financial people, as part of this plan. There's a realistic possibility that they might reset the world monetary system. But back to to a something like a gold standard. Do I have this right? Could you explain about this part and how it fits in with the other part that you were just explaining?
Yeah, so anything we say on this grounds is speculative.
Right.
With respect to
Right.
the Genius Act, it's not speculative. We can
Yeah. Yeah.
see we can see the act. It was approved. Um,
But it's part
you
of
know,
a longer term strategy, is what you're
it,
saying.
it is. That's why I
Yeah.
said it's a
Yeah.
multifaceted strategy with multiple legs to it. So,
Mm.
so again, the main objectives of the Genius Act would be to establish regulatory clarity around stablecoins, to protect consumers, promote innovation. That's a key one.
Yeah.
Promote innovation. They're not trying to
Yeah.
stifle innovation. They want to become the crypto blockchain capital of the world because they
Yeah.
see that as a tremendous growth
Yeah.
opportunity for the next
Because
several
innovation is very key
decades.
to capitalism, isn't it?
Key.
Yeah.
It's what drives growth.
Yeah.
Innovation drives growth. So, and they also want to strengthen U.S. dollar dominance at a time when U.S. dollar dominance is waning. So they're
Yeah.
trying to revitalize it. And of course, if the world knows that the U.S. has these stable coins that are U.S. dollar backed by treasuries, and they're very liquid, they can be sent anywhere, and they're secure. I mean, why not? Like, I mean, that
Yeah.
becomes very attractive to a lot of people in a lot of different countries. And then, of course, they're trying to establish financial stability, mitigate risks,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so forth through the Genius Act. Then I'll answer your question on the gold reset, but before we do that, let's just quickly talk on the Clarity Act.
Yeah.
So the Clarity Act is because I'll try to tie it all together.
Yeah. Sure.
So the Clarity Act is the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act of 2025, which was introduced May 29th, 2025, which is to establish a regulatory framework for digital assets,
Mm.
particularly for those relying on blockchain technology.
Right.
It's trying to resolve regulatory ambiguity, again, foster innovation, and protect consumers in the digital asset markets. It's going into the regulations in the United States, and it's making it crystal clear for what entity, whether it's the SEC, or whether it's commodities, like who regulates what in the cryptocurrency sphere. So nobody's out there guessing. Nobody's
Right. So
guessing as
they're
to
not
what
trying to
is and
red
what isn't.
tape everything. They're trying to create certainty, right?
Certainty there,
Yeah,
because
gotcha.
there was no
Yeah.
certainty before. Basically, you have I'm sure you've heard the term being debanked.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the
Yeah.
things that happened is, like a large number of CEOs of cryptocurrency exchanges, dealers, um, entities in the United States, um, and their employees were often debanked in the United States because there was confusion as to whether what they were doing was legal or illegal,
Right.
and so they would just become debanked and had other things
Mm.
happen to them, and that's no way to run a business.
Yeah. That
So
also
this
drives away
aims.
investors too, doesn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
And it stifles innovation because
Yeah.
nobody wants to invest any capital in this because nobody knows if there's going
Right.
to be a payday at the end of it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Clarity Act aims to fix all that and establishes who gets to regulate what are the rules, and then here are the rules. Everybody can read them
Yeah.
and play nice and accordingly.
Yeah.
So that was non-existent during the Biden administration, and instead it was more let's just say chaotic. So
Sort of like
so
what was going on in Joe Biden's mind most of the time.
I could say stuff, but I won't.
Chocolate chip ice cream. Oh, look at the kitty. No,
Yeah, you're
no,
you're
I'm sorry.
tempting
I
me
shouldn't
here.
joke. Dementia is not a joking matter, but
No,
let's face it. I
no.
mean, the American people were really lied to there. That was really, really disgusting. Of course, we could all see it, and it came to a head in that debate where the poor man just it's really astonishing that the people who were sort of handling him would actually put him in that position.
Yeah,
And looking back now in hindsight, you almost suspect that it was an act of sabotage. But who knows? We're speculating. But I didn't mean to sort of jump in on your riff. But
yeah,
Peter, before we go any further, folks who are watching and listening to this can see why we asked Peter to come on the program, because he's just a wealth, pardon the pun, of information
thank you.
on these topics. Before we go any further, Michael, I wonder, have we got any questions or comments that from people who are watching and listening that maybe people have a question for Peter? Oh, Michael, you're muted. I can't hear you, buddy.
There we
There
go.
you are.
Sorry, the dog was making a little bit of a racket, so I.
Oh,
had
I
to-
thought that was Peter's guard dog.
Well, I have one too.
Okay.
He's just
Yeah.
smaller and white.
Great.
Yeah, Leighton, we have two of them now.
Oh,
Oh.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Don't go near, folks, don't go near Peter's house unless you're invited. Okay. So,
Yes.
Michael, have we had any comments or
Well,
questions?
we have a comment from Marilyn, and I'll bring that up.
Oh, great.
And
Can you read that, Peter?
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Marilyn, interesting enough, we were actually just talking about this very thing before the podcast started. That was one of the things
Marilyn's
we
a
were
very
talking
smart lady. She posts a lot of really interesting stuff on our
about. Yeah.
page, on our X page. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead, Peter.
No, I absolutely sympathize
Yeah.
with that comment. So if anybody didn't see it, essentially the comment, something to the effect of all this stuff is so complex.
Yeah.
How is the average person expected to understand it?
Yeah.
Maybe, and I don't know if that's just the way it is or if that's done on purpose. It's kind of hard to
Yeah.
say. Maybe they don't want the average person to understand it. When I say they, I mean
Yeah.
who's coming up with
Yes.
this stuff.
Yeah,
So one of the things that Leighton and I discussed before this podcast was, at the end and during, where possible, we're going to try to take some of these complex topics and simplify, like maybe
Yeah.
oversimplify it in such a way.
I think you've been doing a great job of that so
far.
far, by the way,
Yeah.
Peter. I mean,
We're trying, but essentially, I'll actually reframe it like this. What is the overarching problem here? And the overarching problem is excessive debt.
yeah.
So you have grossly excessive debt levels in Canada on the consumer side and in the U.S. on the government side. Where if you're looking at government debt of $37 trillion, not including unfunded liabilities, which if you include that, it's well over 100 trillion, and nobody really knows what that number actually is. But even at 37 trillion, it's not the nominal number that hurts, it's the annual interest expense. So 37
Right.
trillion, people might say, whatever.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, that's $1 trillion of interest annually.
Yeah, we hear about these numbers all the time, and it's hard to fathom what they
Yeah.
mean.
Well,
They're
$1
just
trillion
paying the interest
is $1
on the
trillion,
debt.
like $1 trillion of tax
But that
receipts. So
that number alone exceeds most people's imaginations, Peter. Like
it's
a
hard to
trillion.
imagine how much $1 trillion is, like how big of a
Oh,
number that is. But needless to say, it is a huge, colossal number,
yeah,
and that money, which is effectively donated through tax receipts, by Americans, $1 trillion of it, and that's more than the military budget every given year,
wow.
is just gone. It's gone. A lot of it
Just
to
an
foreign
interest.
investors, just an interest.
Yeah, wow.
So that's becoming a structural impediment to the U.S. functioning,
Yeah,
because if you take $1 trillion of interest and add it to entitlements, so like Social Security,
yeah.
Medicare, Medicaid, they're
Checks,
at
checks in the
yeah,
mail. Yeah.
yeah, they're basically at 103% of tax receipts. So what that means is
How can
take
that be
all the,
possible? I mean, how do
and
they
that
do?
doesn't
I
include
guess if you can
military.
print money, right? If you can print money, you can do it.
Well, yeah, but again, there's limits. Some
Yeah,
people say there's no limits, but I believe there are limits. So at 103% of tax receipts, what that means is they're spending more just on interest payments and entitlements than they're actually collecting in taxes. And we
right.
haven't even gotten to military spending or any other kinds of spending. So it's a huge problem. And then again, combine that with I'll call it a $2 trillion trade
Right.
deficit.
Hmm.
Money is just between the interest leaving the country and trade deficit money leaving the country. The U.S. is effectively being hollowed out. So this administration is trying to stop that, or to at least make it less bad.
Right.
And now this is not an easy task. So this is how I'm going to answer it. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
this is a really, really
So
difficult
they're
and
really
complex
thinking
task.
serious about how to tackle this problem.
They're
Yeah.
bringing together basically their best and their brightest in terms of what can we do. And there's not one single thing they can do. They have to do multiple things,
Right.
and it almost all has to work. For in almost like a symphony or a dance.
Yeah.
For this to work in the long run.
Yeah.
But yes, these are very complex topics. We'll do my very best to try to simplify them. But essentially, what they're trying to fix is an overarching debt problem and interest and entitlements problem, and they want to bring that down.
So, Leighton.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. So, a way to figure out the size of $1 trillion, that would buy you 20,000 F-150s.
Oh my goodness.
20,000. So, in my town,
Oh,
everyone could have 10
wow.
F-150s.
That's a lot of trucks.
That's a lot of trucks.
I wonder
And
if
that's just
Amazon,
1 trillion.
I don't even think Amazon has that many trucks.
No. So times 20,000 by 35
Annually.
Wow.
annually.
Wow. Annually. That's
Right?
a lot
So
of trucks.
so
Wow.
yeah. So this is what it is.
Thanks for that,
And
Michael. That's
Yeah.
very vivid.
And the
Yeah.
other thing is to answer that question is it's something called statecraft. And
Right.
so essentially governments have for many, many years used something called statecraft, which means that if you're doing something complex and negotiating something complex, you're not gonna like a good poker player in a poker game, you're not gonna show all your cards. You're
Right.
gonna purposely blur and obfuscate like what your real intentions are and what you're really gonna do. Because
Unless
if you made
you're
it
unless you're Justin Trudeau, in which case the
unless
only
you're
card,
Justin
card
Trudeau.
game you know is go fish.
Right.
Right.
You're not going to make it overly easy for people to figure out what you're up to.
Right.
Because if you did, then it'd be very easy for your opponent to counter and essentially defeat you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're going to use every tool in their toolbox to keep you guessing basically, and to help their negotiations.
This seems to be the strategy they're employing with Canada. I mean, you
Very much so.
just never know.
You can see it.
Yeah, and
can see
Carney and his group just seem to be very much at sea. None of them really know what to do. They don't have any answers. There doesn't seem to be any. I read The Art of the Deal, and from what I understand
Hmm.
of it, I understand some of the things about Donald Trump. One is that he's very relational,
Yes.
and he's also very transactional. So he could be your really worst enemy right now, and if you can see this in the elections, he has some nickname for his opponent, and then after that person is no longer his opponent, then he's his friend, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
there doesn't seem to be any kind of relationship, working relationship between Mr. Carney and Mr. Trump. That's one problem. And we don't and they don't seem to be able to achieve any kind of, transaction. It's hard to understand why, because, and this is a point that I think is lost on a lot of people when they see the way America is dealing with us. But the one thing that's very obvious to me is that no matter what Mr. Trump says, Canada is a very important trading partner for the United States. If that
Yes.
weren't true, then he wouldn't be so upset because he can't work out a trade deal, and he wouldn't be imposing all these tariffs. I mean, Mr. Trump and his administration know that Canada is very important to their economy. And I think Mr. Carney should understand, no matter what he's saying about us joining the EU, that America is our most important trading partner. So why can't they get a deal done, Peter? What do you think about that?
So let's try to take a bird's eye view perspective of the battlefield, so to speak.
Yeah.
And while I will admit that I may not have voted for Mr. Carney, in from a political
You don't have to. You don't have to tell us.
yeah. So even if I didn't vote for him, I will say a little bit about his background and where he comes
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
which is he's a graduate of Oxford. He was a director at Goldman Sachs. And let's just say you don't become director at Goldman Sachs unless you've done something.
Yeah.
And then from Goldman Sachs, he became Bank of Canada governor. And you don't go from Goldman Sachs and become promoted to the head of a major central bank like Canada's unless, once again, you've done something.
Mhm.
And then from there to go to the Bank of England, an even more important central bank, one of the oldest central banks in the world. I mean, now this is, getting silly almost call it his background.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
He's got a
you know,
resume. You can't.
He's
You
got a
can't
resume,
take that
and
away
then
from him.
chairman of Brookfield. I
Yeah.
mean, it goes on and on. So, while I may have not, voted for him, I will not say that he's stupid.
No.
So I have a feeling. I don't know for a fact.
He's
but
also a
I,
very successful politician. He's only won once, and he's the leader of a G7 country. So he's successful there
Right.
too, which is kind of a
Yeah.
trick that Donald Trump turned himself, right?
Right. So while I can't read into his mind necessarily, I would speculate that he knows exactly what's going on, that he understands this fully, better than I do, even
Yeah.
in many instances. The problem for him becomes politics
Yeah.
because he may be getting certain messages from the United States, like messages such as, we don't need you for your automobile industry. Sorry,
Right.
we just don't need you.
Yeah.
And or messages like, we don't like your supply chain management regime that you have
Right.
for Ontario and Quebec.
Mm.
And if you want us to have a deal with you, and I'm speaking from an American perspective, but we do need your energy, and
Yeah.
we do need some of your mining resources, possibly gold, possibly rare earth minerals. We do need those things. So how about this? We'll do a deal with you, but forget your automotive. Forget your supply chain management. Give us the oil, give us the gas, give us the mining resources. And the easiest thing for Carney to do is just simply to sit down and say, "Sure, let's do it. Where do we sign? Because we're gonna. If we did that, we would get rich in the process as a nation. Like we would sell them. We would double our oil and gas production. We would revitalize our mining industry. Like we would probably flourish."
I'm sensing there's a hitch coming to this.
Well, sure, there's a hitch because power would transfer from Ontario and Quebec to Alberta and Saskatchewan. And for many,
Mustn't
that is
have that in Canada.
that is absolutely not for me, of course. I live in Calgary,
Yeah.
but for many in Eastern Canada, call it
Yeah.
quote unquote the Laurentian elite, as
Yeah.
some refer to them as.
Hmm.
That's untenable. That's just a
Yeah.
non-starter,
Yeah.
conversation. So he probably knows what he needs to do. He's probably trying to figure out how's he going to do that
Yeah.
and still keep the country together, still retain power in Eastern Canada.
Okay, this is really interesting, and that really illuminates a point. And I want to go on to this next question, and I realize this is somewhat political, but I think it's in your wheelhouse. Many people suspect, or I should say, uh, they claim, or they level the allegation at Mr. Carney, perhaps justifiably, that the liberals' focus is mainly ideological, that it is not practical, it's not pragmatic, it's not economical in the sense of doing what's best for Canadians, Canadian families, Canadian businesses, you know. And so my question for you is, in terms of the end game for the Carneys, you've mapped out very, very astutely kind of where Trump is taking America and where Canada might fit into their plan. But what do you think the plan is for Carney and the Liberals? Because as you know, some of the things they're doing seem to be very much designed to harm the economy. For example, Bill C5, they're placing all these impediments on big Canadian infrastructure projects that would do a lot for the country, as and imposing more environmental restrictions on development of Alberta oil and gas, which don't just help Alberta, but they also help the entire economy. Let's face it. So what do you think the end game is for Mr. Carney? Do you think he really desires? I mean, obviously he inherited a mess from Justin Trudeau, but do you
Yes.
think his desire or his plan is to clean that up and really try to restore, the overall wealth and prosperity of Canada? Or do you think that his plan is mainly ideological and globalist in nature? Is he a pawn in a game, or does he really want to help get Canada back on track? This is kind of an open question about Mr. Carney, and we really don't have an answer yet. I'm curious to know what you think.
So we don't have an answer yet, but we can speculate.
Right.
So first of all, who is Mark Carney and what does he represent? So he would represent what we would commonly refer to as a group of globalists
Right.
and entities that are pro-globalism.
Yeah.
What Trump is doing is pro-America, not
Right.
necessarily pro-globalism. So
Yeah.
first and foremost,
There's definitely a
gonna be
tension there, isn't there?
There's a
Yeah.
tension there. There's
Yeah.
absolutely a conflict there because Trump is enacting pro-America policies, which make
Right.
sense for America, but don't necessarily make sense for globalism.
Right.
And then the other part of it is Carney. There's a Freudian slip there between Carney and Keynes, John
Yeah.
Maynard Keynes.
Right.
Without speaking on behalf of Carney, which I wouldn't do, but I would perceive that he probably believes more in the Keynesian school of thought
Right.
than he does in, say, the Chicago School of Economics or
Right.
supply side management
Right.
school of thought.
He wants the
Keynesian
government leading the economy. He sees the
Government.
government leading the economy, as opposed
Yes.
to what Milton
Private
Friedman would
sector.
say is, the government should be small and really creating an environment where business can flourish. In other words, the government should get out of the way of business. Whereas
Yes.
Carney and Keynesians would say, no, we need the government to steer the economy so
Right.
that it's hitting certain markers that government
Right.
needs to reach. Is that a fair overall
Yes.
picture?
Control.
Yeah.
It comes down to control. Who drives the bus, essentially? So Keynesians, Carney, globalists, they believe in centralized control,
Yeah.
where you have a central entity through many of the acts you just mentioned. You just mentioned a bunch of bills and acts and so
Yeah.
forth. But the one overarching theme of all of them is they're trying to gain control,
Yeah.
even at the expense of the economy and even at the expense of people. they're trying to gain control because they want to be in charge. They want to be the gatekeeper. They want to decide who wins and loses. They want to decide who can go forward and who cannot go forward, and so forth.
Yeah.
Whereas, as opposed to decentralization or decentralized control, where actually, I'll give you an example. The banks in Canada versus banks in the United States. So you can see right off the bat a huge difference between Canada and the United States. Why is it that we only have 5 major banks that control most of the banking in Canada, whereas the United States literally has thousands of banks? And think of the control that gives those 5 Canadian banks, where those 5 Canadian banks, who are all headquartered, in either Toronto or Montreal, they decide who in, Calgary or who in Kelowna or who in Saskatoon does or does not get a loan. They don't know these.
But is that a
people.
good
They
thing
don't-
for the economy? Is that a good thing
Well-
for Canadians?
So I would argue no, because what happens is when you have a large amounts of centralized control, like call it 5 big banks, 5 big banks are going to want to deal with big customers. They're not going to want to deal with the little guy. They're not going to want to deal with the small business owner who wants to open up a gas station or who wants to, open up a corner hardware store or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not a big enough customer for them. They want to deal with the Bell Canadas and the Teluses and, like large companies and entities. Whereas if you have, like in the US, more of a decentralized banking system, which is becoming more centralized, by the way, unfortunately, but historically it has been quite decentralized. You literally have these small banks that operate in small towns, and everybody knows everybody. And if you're opening up a gas station in that small town, you probably went to high school with the bank manager of that bank in that small town, and you can go in there and you can, shake hands and get a loan.
It reminds me of a Frank Capra film most people have probably seen. It's a Wonderful Life. Remember the Bailey Building and Loan?
Yeah, that's right. But that's how it is in the United States. You have thousands of banks that decentralize control and decentralize who does and does not get money. Whereas in Canada, who does and does not get money is controlled by a very, very small number of large entities. And I would argue that stifles growth because then that incentivizes the banks to do large loans, often for asset price speculation, as opposed to doing loans into the real economy, that actually contributes to GDP. So, for example, when banks lend, say, for someone to speculate on real estate, they want to buy 5 houses or something like that, or 5 condos. That's not necessarily adding to GDP. That's just pushing more money into the real estate market and creating asset price inflation in the real estate market, as opposed to when banks lend to a business that makes widgets or a mechanic shop or a small factory that makes anything, like in a small town USA. When banks lend to the real economy, it actually contributes to GDP growth, as opposed to banks. And it builds wealth, like real wealth, like actual real wealth, So I would argue a preference towards a more decentralized banking system where you have many banks competing and smaller banks who are more likely to give loans to the real economy.
So what you're saying, Peter, if I have this correctly, that Mark Carney and his government probably want to restore the Canadian economy, probably want the economy to flourish, but they think they're going to get there through very different means than the ones that the Trump administration are employing. That in Canada, that Mr. Carney, who's a central banker, he thinks that the way to fix the Canadian economy, if you will, is through more central control, because he thinks he and his government have a very clear idea about where the economy should go and how to get there. Even though there really isn't much of an historical track record for successful economies being built that way. That doesn't sound very promising for Canadians, does it?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And also to make it even a little bit harder for Mr. Carney. So in a way, I'm trying to empathize with them. A lot of what Trump
You're being
is
very
doing
fair
goes,
to him, more than most Albertans would be.
Well,
so, bravo.
I'm trying to be fair, where possible. Like I said, what Trump is doing goes against the fabric of Keynesianism, say for
Yeah,
example, and
yeah,
centralized control, and
yeah.
at the
You
same
see that in
time,
his relationship with the Fed, especially, don't we? Where he's really putting
yes,
pressure on them to move away from this Keynesian stuff that you're talking about. Yeah, yeah.
then
I think you're
that's a
Mr.
very
Thorne. You wrote about that in a piece. By the way, there's some really great stuff on there's a newsletter that Wellington Altus puts out each month, and Mr. Thorpe writes wonderful stuff on there. And he just did a piece on this a couple of months ago that I read, and we actually featured it on our program. Sorry, go ahead, Peter. I just wanted to put in a plug there
yeah,
for
no,
you.
thank you very much. No,
Yeah,
Dr. James Thorne is a huge asset of mine and
yeah,
everybody and our entire firm in terms
yeah.
of
Big brain guy. Not that you aren't, but he's
well,
yeah.
there's levels, right? So, and he's certainly at a level that can only aspire to
He's
reach,
deep,
one day.
very deep thinker. You can just
Yeah,
tell. Yeah,
yeah, very, very, very much so. But this goes, what Trump is doing goes against the fabric of Carney's, or the people that back Carney, their belief system,
yeah,
but more so what he's probably asking of Canada in terms of resource development and so forth.
yeah.
Also flies in the face of ideology, around carbon or climate change goals
Wow.
that not only he may have, but he may have sold that messaging or that
Right.
ideology to his
He's
voter
tethered to
base.
that.
He's
Yeah,
tethered to that. That's a
yeah,
good way to put it. I
yeah,
like that. He's tethered to
yeah.
that. So for him to now do an about face and go in the other direction has to be
Hmm.
very difficult for him, even if he knows
Wow.
that's what he must do.
That is very fascinating and illuminating because it explains so much about why a deal isn't being done between Mr. Trump and Mr. Carney, even though it's in everyone can see it's in the best interest of Americans and Canadians to have this deal done. What you've just
Yes.
described explains so much, all the roadblocks, all the impediments, and it
Yes.
sounds like it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of hard work to sort of navigate through them, isn't it?
It'll take a lot of hard work, but my base case is that a deal will be done.
Yeah,
And the
that's good
reason
news.
yeah, well, I mean, I just look at it and I just try to think of it from a bird's eye view. He has to do a deal,
Yeah,
because I know you mentioned before we were talking about whether it's Stephen Harper giving advice to Carney
yeah, yeah.
about that we need to expand our reach, to other nations, which is true.
Hmm.
There's no doubt about that. We should, where possible, try to expand our export base and our trading partners. However, and this is a big however, when you have the either the largest or one of the largest economies in the world right to our southern border, and we share a massively long border. I think it's the longest undefended border in the world. Could be wrong on
Maybe
that,
in
but
history. Yeah,
yeah, it's a big border, and they're also the world's hegemon and world's reserve currency. So, and just think of almost the lunacy. Instead of trading with them over short distances by truck and rail, we're gonna do what? We're gonna trade with countries on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean
yeah,
or on the other side of the Pacific Ocean and traverse like very complex supply chain routes.
yeah,
Ship our beef to Australia, perhaps.
yeah.
I mean, I
Nothing
don't know.
against Australians.
Nothing
Yeah,
against
too right,
Australians, but
Mike.
it's a
Yeah,
long way to ship our beef,
yeah, yeah,
so I believe firmly that a deal must be done. And another way to look at it is um, to, to get a deal done, he's going to have to make concessions to the Americans. He's going to
right.
have to give them a lot or most of what they want.
But
Uh,
the politics are in the way, and the
the politics
ideology's
are
in
in
the
the
way,
way,
right? Yeah,
but if he
yeah,
fails, the politics in a way, but if he fails, for example, and I'm just going to go on a limb here, there is a chance, however small or large, depending on who you ask, but there is a chance that if he fails, he may lose Alberta and he may lose Saskatchewan.
yeah. And you may lose the prime ministership as well, because
He
it
may lose a
sounds like
lot.
Mr. Poilievre, and coming back to a point you made earlier, Mr. Poilievre is poised. Well, there's a by-election that's going to happen on
Yes.
August the 18th. I think it's exceedingly likely that Mr. Poilievre is going to return to Parliament as the representative for Battle
Yeah.
River, Crowfoot, and Alberta, and he's got a plan. You mentioned this earlier. I want to come back to this because this is really important. He's come out with this policy, this new platform called the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which is, let's say, borrowing some of the intellectual property from the Trump administration, repackaged and sort of applied to the Canadian picture. We've kept you here for a little over an hour, but I wanted to come back to this because I know this is an important point, and I also want to I want people listening and watching this to understand this isn't all doom and gloom. You know,
No.
things are going to get better. We have great people in Canada. We're a very blessed nation, and you know, this too shall pass. And I think this Canadian Sovereignty Act is an example of the kind of can-do Canadian attitude where, you know, we can do things really well. We can do some things better than the Americans even. And so I want to come back and let you, you know, sort of explain about this Canadian Sovereignty Act as an example of what we can do to maybe get Canada out of this, out of the economic funk that we're in.
No, I would agree 100%. This is not all doom and gloom. I do believe that a deal will be done because the costs or the repercussions of not doing a deal are so huge
Yeah,
that to
yeah.
not do a deal,
Disastrous,
uh,
really. Would be.
disastrous,
Yeah,
absolutely disastrous. So,
yeah,
I believe they will do a deal, and I believe that deal will be good for Canadians in the long run. It'll be good for Americans, but I believe that Canada will also benefit. It's just that Carney will have to make some tough decisions in terms
yeah,
of who he disappoints, because he's going to end up disappointing somebody,
yeah.
you know, when he goes through all this. But
Mostly he
the
disappoints Alberta right now.
well, he disappoints Alberta, but I think for him to get a deal, he's going to have to disappoint his own voter base, and that's going to be that's
There's
going
the
to
rub. There's the rub,
there's
right?
there's the rub.
Yeah.
Back to Canadian Sovereignty Act. It's a very good way to put it. It's kind of almost a repackaging what Trump is doing, but modified to what Canada needs.
Yeah.
So and this is very smart, I believe, on Pierre's part, because I'll just talk a little bit about what it is. So it's proposed legislation. It's to be tabled in the fall of Parliament, and it focuses on three main pillars. So repealing growth blocking laws. So the act would eliminate several Liberal policies, including Bill C-69, the pipeline and mine construction complications that come out of that. Bill C-48, banning oil tankers on Canada's west coast. This is going to be very interesting if he pulls this one off. The industrial carbon tax. I mean,
Oh,
he already backed down from the consumer carbon tax,
I remember that. Yeah.
but he left the industrial carbon tax in. And don't get me wrong, I'm happy he backed down on the consumer carbon tax. That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
But it's the industrial carbon tax that really hurts Canadians in the back end. And so if that goes away, I mean, that would then equalize, put us in the same playing field as the United States, because they don't have an industrial carbon tax down
No,
there.
they don't. Yeah.
And then the oil and gas emissions cap, electric vehicle sales mandates, single-use plastic bans, and then the censorship law as well, restricting energy
Yeah.
companies' communications. Because you imagine that they're censoring the
Mhm.
communications coming from energy companies, with they can't talk about some of the accomplishments
Yeah.
they've had.
And
They have to.
really severe penalties too, like
Yes, yes.
quasi-criminal, really.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they also want to reward builders. So that's introducing this Canada First reinvestment tax cut, protecting innovation. Does that sound familiar? Because Trump keeps talking about innovation.
Yeah.
Here we go, protecting innovation. And
And
then
Canada has a great history of innovation, though. We really, you know, we have really great people in our country historically, and even right now, we're leaders in things like AI. Obviously, in energy, clean energy,
yes,
Canada's, you know, tops in the world, arguably.
yeah,
And you know, we also produce great podcasts, right, Michael? Just kidding.
the best,
Uh,
right,
Yes, we
Leighton?
do.
The
but
best
you know,
podcast. You know,
about this, you know, when people say, "Oh, you know, Canadian Sovereignty Act," that's just another, you know, CPC idea that's going to die on the operating table because
Mm,
they'll never get into power.
I don't know.
Remember who came up with the idea of axing the tax? Remember
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
Mr.
yeah, yeah,
Poilievre.
yeah.
So hopefully, some of these great ideas, even if Mr. Poilievre doesn't form a government, maybe Mr. Carney will will borrow some of these ideas and implement them, and that could be good for Canadians. So again, this is part of the innovation is in politics too, isn't it? Coming up with these ideas to fix things. This is Canadian ingenuity. These are things that we're really good at, and we have to recognize that and cherish that, don't we?
So this is where this legislation could be very smart, because he actually might be doing. I'm speculating here. I don't know for
Yeah,
sure, but I'm
sure.
just speculating.
Yeah, this
I'm
is
wondering.
this is coffee talk.
This is coffee talk. I'm just wondering if he's doing Carney a favor with this act,
Ah,
because what he's doing, he's presenting an act on his lap. I mean, which makes total sense. I mean, if the Americans are doing all this stuff, why shouldn't we be doing all this stuff? And then we can partner together, get a trade deal done, and both flourish and prosper.
yeah.
Or if he simply accepts it. But if he doesn't accept it, then he's going to have to explain why why he doesn't. Why is he against?
Oh, yeah.
Why is he against growth blocking laws? Why does he not want to reward builders?
Right.
Why does he not want to protect innovation?
Yeah.
I mean, so he's basically backing him into a corner where he has to either agree to it or show
Very clever.
what some might
Yeah.
say true colors, right?
Yeah.
But he might be doing him a favor, because by putting him in that situation, it might be just enough. What's the word? Like an excuse or cover.
Yeah.
Let's just say, for him to say, "Yeah, I support it. Let's do it."
Yeah.
You know,
Interesting.
and then at the
Yeah.
same time does that, a trade deal gets done like the week
Okay.
after or the month
Okay.
after.
All right.
So I'm speculating.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but
Well,
but I
no.
wonder if.
It's good. It's
Yeah.
good to lay these things out, because there's a danger in demonizing people. We don't know what
Yes.
Mr. Carney's real intentions are, and so it's good to it's important to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? But hey, let's bring this down to before we go. We don't want to keep you here all night. We, so we've been talking a lot of what you called kind of the 10,000-foot view. Now, and I realize you can't give advice on this program. That
No.
would be irresponsible. But
That's right.
there are general things that the average investor can do to sort of make good decisions in this time of uncertainty. And do you have some suggestions about this? Just sort of general information to people who are listening and watching this?
Yeah. No, I'll tell you what we're thinking, and I'll echo what you said. We cannot give advice to people we don't know.
Right.
Obviously, full disclaimer. Yes, I'm a senior portfolio manager. I've been doing this for 28 years now. But unless I know somebody and know what their exact
Sure.
risk
You're not
tolerance
the
is,
Oracle of Delphi, right? You don't know.
yeah,
all
I
the
can't
signals.
I
Yeah.
can't speak for all people, of course, but let's just say for many people, or for most people, or maybe what we're thinking, at least what we're thinking, although what works for us or makes sense to us, is a few things. Number one, we don't believe that what is commonly referred to as a traditional 60-40 stock to bond balanced portfolio, we don't believe that's going to work as well in the coming years as it did in past years. And the reason I say that is because
You've
traditionally,
kind of explained why, haven't you, in a lot of ways? Yeah. But anyway,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, because most people traditionally just put 60% of the money in stocks, 40% in bonds, and away you go, kind of thing. And that used to work really well when we had really high interest rates and interest rates were falling, and basically you had the risk correlation between the stocks and the bonds not be the same.
Right.
However, the problem came to the forefront where once rates kind of hit near zero and then kind of bounced up a little bit from there, but are still relatively low by historical standards, that diversification or anti-correlation from owning stocks and bonds together doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work, at least doesn't work as well anymore, which reduces diversification and also reduces earnings potential. So we're looking to seek out alternative assets and portfolios that have what's called a lower correlation. And not to get overly technical, but lower correlation means does not have the same risk profile.
Right.
So if you have two investments that have the same risk profile, they kind of go up and down in unison. And if you have two investments that have an opposite risk profile or negative risk profile, they go they go opposite. One goes up, the other one goes down. But that's not too useful because even though you're diversified, you're not making any money. What we're looking for in structuring portfolios is either low correlation or non-correlation, but not opposite or the same. So what that means is you have two investments or two asset classes that are just not, they're just different. They're one, they're doing their own thing independent of each other.
Right.
And that's how you get true diversification. You can't argue
Yeah.
that they're the same.
Yeah.
Adding a little bit of private equity or private debt can help in this. I know you and I have talked about that in
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah.
But it's at the cost of reduced liquidity and reduced transparency. So
Okay.
while that is a solution to look at, it's not necessarily the solution, but it's certainly something to look into.
Yeah.
But the addition of, say, precious, something as simple, this is super easy. The addition of precious metals to your balanced portfolio, like gold and silver, bullion,
Yeah.
not stocks, but bullion, certainly does help because they have a relatively low correlation to both stocks and bonds while providing great returns
Yeah.
in the long run. So, for example, a lot of people might be highly surprised that gold has actually outperformed the Standard & Poor's 500 in the last 25 years since the turn of the century.
Yeah.
If you
We
ask
don't hear
100
that,
people-
do we?
No, you almost never hear that. You always people automatically assume that the stock market has outperformed gold, and while that has been true during certain periods of time, it's not necessarily true over long periods
Over
of
the
time.
long haul. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're also bullish on cryptocurrency too, aren't you? You
Yeah, so it's
recommend
not
having
just-
that in your portfolio. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So specifically Bitcoin, and maybe considering a few others to a lesser degree, but in the case of Bitcoin, it already has a relatively low correlation to both stocks and bonds. But more importantly, it's shown to greatly improve what's called Sharpe ratios within portfolios. So Sharpe ratios are simply a measurement of risk-adjusted returns, meaning, okay, you got a certain return, but you need to take that return you got and adjust it for how much risk did you take. I.e., if you took a lot of, if you had a good return, but you took a lot of risk, you need to kind of almost discount that a bit. But if you had a good return but took very low risk, then you almost have to emphasize that as being a really good thing.
Yeah.
So when you add Bitcoin to a portfolio in small quantities, like something as simple as 3 to 5%, that's been proven even by the CFA Institute. They wrote a paper on this, that it improves Sharpe ratios across portfolios. And then when you blend that with gold and silver, it's even better.
Yeah. So these
so-
mixtures and balancing are really an important aspect of all this, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. So again, not going to work for everybody out there. But if we take that traditional 60-40 balance portfolio and modify it a bit and say, okay, the 60% say represents risk, and if we take that risk instead of it all being stocks, a stock-based risk, we say, okay, well maybe 50% can be public equities, 5% private equities, and 5% Bitcoin. So 55, that's 60. Okay, that's your risk portion. But those three elements, have non-correlative qualities to them, and then you blend it on the 40% low risk side, which is usually all bonds. But let's just say instead of 40%, you go to maybe 25% bonds, 10% gold and silver bullion, 5% private debt, and you mix all that together. What we've seen anyways in our experience is you yield much better results as measured by rate of return, also by volatility. So the volatility of the portfolio greatly is reduced, and also highly increased Sharpe ratios or increased risk adjusted returns. And I didn't even monkey with it all that much. I just did a little bit. I just took that basic portfolio, add a little bit of gold, a little bit of silver, a little bit of Bitcoin, and in our experience, it makes the portfolio better.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's the recipe. If you want to learn more about how they do it, they're great people. They've been a tremendous blessing to my family. It's the Wellington Altus team. Peter's there, his brother's there. Really, really smart, good people. If you want to learn more about them, check them out. We're going to provide the links to their website. I want to thank you, Peter, for taking this time to be with us on the program, to really
Pleasure.
share your knowledge and to illuminate some of these things that are really troubling and mysterious, mystifying to many Canadians. As we said off the top of the program, we started a discussion saying, they're so hard to get information, reliable information. And one of the lady who sent in the comment, she said the same thing. How do we get straight answers? We can't seem to get this. So hopefully, in this hour and 20 minutes or so, we've achieved that. And if we have done that, we owe it all to our wonderful guest, Peter Pejovich. So thank you so much, Peter, for being our guest here. Before we close off, Michael, are there any other comments or questions from listeners and viewers that maybe we can address? Or
There are not at
Okay.
this time.
okay, then I think what we'll do is let's turn it over to you, Michael, and you can do our closing prayer if you would.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for joining us. Lord, we are grateful and thankful for your provision and your guiding light. And we pray for clear paths, not only for ourselves and our families, but also our nation, and wisdom for our leaders. The St. Paul did say to pray first for those in authority over us. And so we repent of not following that guidance because we know they need it. And go with us now and give us peace in hearts and minds. In Jesus' name, amen.
What a great prayer. What a great reminder. The Lord says we've got to pray for our enemies. We also got to pray for our leaders because they're
Yes.
important and we rely on them. And we pray that, they will have the wisdom to, to turn to people like Peter for good answers. And we certainly have turned to Peter tonight, and we're so grateful to have had him on the program. We hope that this has been enjoyable and illuminating for you, those of you who have listened and shared. If you like what you've heard, and then please comment on it and share it with your friends. And also, just a reminder, please check out our most recent interview with Maureen Steele, and also our commentary that just came out, which is entitled Onward Christian Soldiers. So thanks everyone for being with us, especially you, Peter, and you, my good friend, Michael, and everyone who tuned in. Thanks for joining us on tonight's Grey Matter live stream. It's been our privilege and honor to be here with you. God bless you and good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael and Layleen. Appreciate it.